When you really strip it down and look at what those offerings actually are, it's minimal to nothing. And it was not okay.
Welcome to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, a show about adoption, foster care, advocacy, and becoming the best caregiver possible. Pull up a chair. We're glad you've joined us. Here are your hosts, Mike and Kristen Berry.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, or if this is your first time, welcome to you. We're glad you're here, whether you are a seasoned listener of this podcast or you're just jumping in. We're so glad you're here. We're glad you've tuned in. We hope that you get a lot of insight and encouragement out of this show and out of this interview. We are excited to reshare an interview that we did with our good friend Ashley Mitchell. She's amazing. She's going to be with us at the Replanted Conference this coming October up in Naperville, Illinois. So cool. You can find out more about that at replantedconference.org. It's going to be an amazing time, and so we thought we'd drop this interview back in here with our listening audience. We love Ashley. She has such an amazing story as a birth mom. She is honest and open and raw about this journey and her perspective, and you can learn. There's so much. Every time we listen to Ashley, we learn a lot. We do, and you're going to learn a lot from her in this open and honest interview that we jumped into. What happens? What does it look like when birth parents and foster and adoptive parents work together, support one another, encourage one another on this journey? Oftentimes, you guys, let's be real. This is not a concept that is often talked about. If you went through foster care training, right, when you were getting when you were preparing to adopt, this is probably not a conversation you had. But we're airing this interview. Ashley is a good friend of ours because we can learn so much. We believe you can learn so much from birth parents, from adult adoptees, from former foster youth, and we have lots of friends who are birth parents, adult adoptees, and former foster youth. And so we're excited to share these interviews with you in the hopes that you gain encouragement and insight. So that's coming up in just a moment. If you are brand new and this is your first time checking us out, again, welcome to you. Make sure you jump over to honestlyadoption.com/podcast. You can catch up on past episodes and learn more about the work we do at the Honestly Adoption Company. We're all about giving you an honest and open 360-degree view of the adoption and foster care journey. So check that out. Make sure you jump over there, visit that, and man, listen. Let's just jump into this interview. You guys are going to love Ashley. If you've never heard anything that she's spoken on before, you're in for a treat. Here we go. Our interview with Ashley Mitchell.
Hey, you guys. How are you? I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're good. We're excited to have you here.
I'm especially excited because I am usually the one following down the rabbit trails of social media. And so I found you, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, and just started reading everything you have to say and listening to your perspective, and just found it so refreshing to hear the way that you speak with vulnerability and encouragement and firmness. And I just appreciate that about your character. And so I'm excited to be talking to you kind of face to face.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, just in general, I just turned 40 this year, so that's exciting and new. My husband and I have been married 11 years. We have 2 children. We live in Utah, which is great. We love it here. I grew up here, so this is home for me. And I am a birth mother. I placed my son for adoption. He'll be 14 in April. And so we've been at this game for a while. And yeah, so we're just hanging out, being just a crazy family. We're nuts all the time. And with everything going on in the world, it's extra crazy. And I'm just sharing my story to anyone that is willing to pull up a chair and listen. So I'm glad that you found me and have been leaning in with me. It's been fun. It's been really fun. I love our Instagram community, and it's provided a really great space for me to just share what's going on. So
Yeah, I love that. we found you at Big Tough Girl on Instagram. I think I forgot to say that a minute ago. So if you're listening in, go and follow her right now. You're going to just love that and really be, I think, encouraged and challenged
and
at the same time.
We'll put that link into the show notes on our blog. Perfect. And also on YouTube as well.
So we're an adoptive family with 8 children. And one of our children was adopted at birth. And another one of our children was adopted privately from a friend of ours passed away. The rest of our children were adopted through the foster care system. And so while our story is a little bit different, as I've been reading about your perspective, it has really caused me to think so much about all of my kids' biological parents, and particularly my daughter who was adopted at birth. I've always wondered about, what her mom was thinking and how she's doing. And we actually hunted her down a couple years ago. She requested a closed adoption, but my daughter was at the time 14 and just needed to know. And we had gotten to this point where we were like, I'll do anything. So I'm like, crazy lady trying to stop people on the street, like, hey, are you my kid's mom? And so I finally
That's really creepy that you said you hunted her down.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say, like, the image that comes through mind is like,
you married me, so you should feel uncomfortable.
Most people say stalk, but you said hunted, so it's a little different.
Oh, I thought stalked sound worse, but now
I just have to say that I
feel bad.
I pictured, so we have a 12 passenger van with tinted windows. Around. And I could just picture, like in my weird messed up mind, I pictured like the Capricorn and Hunger Games and Kristen driving her 12 passenger van hunting.
Like,
that's terrible.
Stopping ladies who look like my daughter.
Off the rail, man.
I did not do that.
Okay.
And you know it.
I appreciate your ambition in that, though.
All right. I used all my resources that were available in 2016, namely the internet, and just went looking on every piece of information I could find. And finally, I found her and I knew immediately, this is my kid's mom. Looks just like her. She's beautiful. And so I sent her a message, and as soon as I did, I was like, what have I done?
Yeah, you can't undo that.
Right. Hi, I've been looking for you for 14 years, like a crazy lady. So, but actually, for us, I think we were trying to respect her desire for privacy. And what we found instead, it took a while, but then they met each other, and then she just attended our daughter's musical last spring, where she had the lead role, and we sat side by side. And it turns out that she is just as shy and introverted as our daughter is. And so I think some of that, in her case, that need for privacy was a lot of just her personality. Now that she's a part of our daughter's life, she's just as funny and sweet and fun to be with as our daughter. My point is that, just listening to you talk about what all of that has felt like and that grief, I don't think that we ever denied that there was grief there. We just didn't know how to navigate it or how to support well. And so here we are, listening to where you've come from and how you really gather birth moms together in support and encouragement. Can you tell us a little bit about your birth mom support groups and how that started and where you are now?
Yeah. So, I was 26 by the time I delivered my son. And, so on paper, I had all these things that said, you can single parent, I had the medical insurance and a job and all of these things. And so it's a lot easier for society to understand why a woman would choose to single parent in a situation like mine, as opposed to, a lot of things that you maybe see in foster care or, younger women getting pregnant. But I'm more the demographic actually of women that are placing their babies. This age group is a lot more, is older, maybe has other children. We haven't known all of these things, through this time. And so I made the decision to place my son. And for me, the propaganda was, you're building this amazing family and doing this amazing thing. And my agency was like, you're so brave and selfless and awesome. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, everyone loves me and thinks I'm amazing. And the reality of that was so far from the message that I had been told and that I had accepted. And so when, it's, unless you have given birth to a child, it's hard to understand. And I know there's a lot of families listening that come through adoption through infertility and things like that. But giving birth to my son is one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. And I have 2 other biological children. I've been blessed to be able to give birth 3 different times. And even in crisis and in a situation that I didn't want, it changes you to the core of who you are. And he was my firstborn, and I'd never been a mother before. I had never done any of this before. And then I give birth and I'm holding this baby. And then within 72 hours, I'm a birth mom and giving him to somebody else. And wrapping my mind around that was so overwhelming. I come home and everything about my body is preparing for motherhood. My milk's coming in and my hormones are trying to balance, and I'm still healing from delivery. And I'm like, everything about my body says, you're a mother, you're a mother, you're a mother. And I have no baby, so this ambiguous loss of just, how do I wrap my mind around this that doesn't ever actually have closure or understanding, was crushing. And I live in Utah, so there's a very strong culture here, a religious culture that just doesn't talk about stuff. And it's not just Utah culture. It's not just, the Mormon culture. It's religion culture in general.
Right. Yeah.
We've done this amazing thing and we're going to move on, and you helped this family. We helped this family. Look at these families we've built. Look at what we've done in the orphan care and using the Bible and all of these things. And these women, what about these women that gave birth to their children and are no longer mothers to their children? And so that grief was indescribable, and it was very isolating and painful and lonely, and no one was talking to me, and we were going to move on as life is normal. And that doesn't ever work, ever. And in true Ashley Mitchell fashion, because I don't do anything halfway, I was like, for 5 years, I call my infamous Jerry Springer years. But I was the stereotype. I didn't lose my child through foster care, but I had so many of the same experiences that women that come through foster care have. There was a lot of substance abuse. There was a lot of casual relationships. There was a lot of legal issues. I almost killed someone in a drunk driving accident. I did time in jail. And none of these kinds of things happened until after I placed my son. And so now I'm in this entirely new world of coexisting with this identity that didn't make sense, that I didn't understand, and that I didn't like. Right. And it was so dark. Those first years were incredibly dark and painful. Yeah. And it's just one of those things, for me, there was rock bottom, and then you dig a little bit deeper, and then there I was. But for me, unfortunately, we have these aha moments where like the light turns on and things turn around for you, and these game changers, right? And for me, unfortunately, ended up in a suicide attempt and being locked in a mental hospital for 5 days in Nashville, Tennessee. But it wasn't until that point when I sat with a psychiatrist, and he's like, so what's going on? What's going on? And I credit so much of my healing to him. I hated him in the moment, but he's amazing and brilliant and really saved my life. But he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm fine. He's like, honey,
Obviously not.
we're fitting you for a straitjacket. You're not fine. Like, what's going on? You've been a danger to yourself, to so many other people. What's going on? And we started digging and digging, and unfortunately I had 5 years of crap piled on top of, but we finally get down to this trauma of my son. And I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't anyone tell me?
Yeah.
And, everyone's like, well, isn't it so obvious? What do you think? And I was like, you don't understand. When we're given this message that we're doing this amazing and beautiful thing and saving these families and giving a better life to our child and all of this crap, and then we're just internalizing this horrific grief and pain, it's not okay. And we aren't okay. And so from that point, it changed, the light turned on and changed everything for me, because now I finally had a name. And I could work with that. Now that I knew what my grief was, I could work with that. I could get the meds, I could get the help, I could get the counseling, all of those things. And it was night and day for me. But it took somebody to say, you're grieving your son. You've experienced trauma. And for the last 5 years, you've just been re-triggering all of this trauma over and over and over. And I was like, oh my gosh. So now I wake up, and I'm like, wow, this is a lot. So it kind of started from that mess, from that mess. And all of this time, there was no contact with my son and his family. I was laughing when you were talking about sending that message on Facebook, because I remember when I finally got up the courage to want to reach out to them, I remember sending an email. It was the last email I had from them. And I really think my email said something like, hi, I don't know if you remember me, but this is actually like, what do you say?
Yeah.
It was so weird.
That's awkward. That's gotta be awkward.
Incidentally,
so
that's
awkward.
Much how mine sounded. Like she wouldn't know who I was. Like,
you just are such an ingrained part of my life, but I don't know if you remember me, but you have my son. Like, it was so awkward, so bad. But anyway, so all of this grief and trauma, and finally saying, I can't be the only person, because grief isolates, and it really makes you think that you are the only person that's been through this, that your story is so unique and painful that no one will get it, which is actually one of the biggest lies in this adoption trauma, I think. And so through that process, I was like, well, I can't be the only woman that's ever placed her child for adoption.
Right.
And now I can't spit without hitting somebody that has some sort of connection to adoption or whatever. But so through that, we started building a community of birth moms that were like, oh my gosh, I did this too. And oh my gosh, you're saying exactly what I've been feeling, but haven't been able to put words to. And then it just spread and grew from there.
Yeah. I think just, listening to you talk about all of that, I think I have always thought about the grief that our kids' parents were feeling. Certainly in foster care, you go through court hearings with parents. Every 3 months you sit in the courtroom together, usually, or at least, in the counties that we were fostering in, you sit in a big room together for like 4 hours every 3 months. You start to get to know people, you meet at the visits together. And so you're on that road together. So in many ways, you have a choice. You can close them out and pretend like you don't see them there. Or you can really jump into all the grief and the mess. With an infant adoption, listening to you talk and listening to some other birth moms through infant adoption really opened my eyes to that rhetoric and that narrative. It's selfless, it's good, it's you're providing a better life. And I guess I hadn't given it a lot of thought, what that says to another person, or what does that really feel like? Or, are you really this praised and hailed giver of life once you walk out of the hospital? And it just, the more that I've listened to you and to other birth moms, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, none of it makes any sense. That doesn't make any sense to say you're doing a selfless and good and kind thing and then to walk away.
Well, and we forget that the adoption journey starts at the hospital, not ends, where they see relinquishment and things like that they're like, oh, she relinquished and now this baby's ours. But what we walk out of the hospital and now for the rest of my life, I will spend more years of my life as a birth mother than not. I mean, it just started for me when I left the hospital.
That's not the end. And
That's
I think too, we do talk a lot about open adoption. That's a big deal for us. Of our 8 kids, all of our kids know or at least the majority. Some of our kids have a lot of siblings. Yes. But they know most of their siblings. Yeah. They know, 1 or 2 of their parents, awesome. Grandparents, aunts and uncles, second cousins. Anyway. So social distancing is hard in a family like ours. We're currently recording this while everyone is on quarantine in the whole country. And when you're related to everybody in Indiana through adoption, it's kind of hard to sit at home by yourself. Yeah. But we do think open adoption is so important. And I think, one of our first clues to that was just to look at our children and to see that they look like their parents. All of these wonderful characteristics that our children have come from somebody else. Their beautiful smile, their laugh, their sense of humor, their creativity. I talked about my daughter meeting her mom for the first time as a teenager. And it was like, Mike and I wanted to laugh with joy. It was seeing the adult version of my daughter. And biology doesn't mean you're going to turn out exactly like your parents. Right. I'm in many ways nothing like my parents. But to see that, what an incredible thing to watch your child, their mannerisms and even their interests, and to see that mirrored in another person is really incredible. So listening to your story, that took you to a place where you realized you needed this connection with other birth moms. You needed time to grieve and to heal. And I love how you are really advocating for that with adoption agencies. And I think there's so much we can learn from that. What can we do? Maybe this is a 2-part question. What are you doing there? So what does that look like? And then what can we do as adoptive parents to push agencies to offer actual support? Maybe there was a 3-part question. So let's just go with those 2 first. What is it you're doing? Tell me what that looks like a little. And what can we do as adoptive parents to support you, to support our agencies or birth parents?
Yeah. This could be a whole episode on its own because there's so much that goes into all of it. But one of the number one questions we get asked from hopeful adoptive parents that are coming through domestic infant adoption is, how do we know that our agencies are ethical? And how do we work with the right kind of agency that's supporting these women? And, it's really hard. Through all of this grief and trauma, we ran online support groups for a really long time. And I think the internet is the best and worst thing that's ever happened to adoption. I think it causes a lot of issues and a lot of insecurity and things in open adoptions. It's great for connection, but it's hard to read through text and screen and things like that. But what we saw, the biggest issue was the Facebook groups. And we ran a Facebook group of birth moms, and it was amazing. And we ran it really well. We were one of the first to really run a support group online. And what we found is we had no business running a support group online. I get so emotional talking about this because this is so hard. The internet never sleeps. And so the grief and trauma, you would be sick if you could be in a birth mom support group and see the kind of trauma that's put online. And I spent 5 years on suicide watch on my bathroom floor with another woman on the other end because of a post on Facebook. And the trauma never sleeps. And what we found is a woman would be in the throes of this horrific grief cycle, and she would post online, and then she'd put her phone down and she was still all alone, and no one's responding because they're asleep or whatever. Right. And there's a lot of, we've lost a lot of women during that time because of unanswered, not that we didn't answer her message and so it was our fault, but we realized that we had no business managing the trauma that we were trying to manage, on top of the fact that we were reliving and reopening our own trauma over and over and over.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like that had to have been, I'm sitting here listening to you. Like, I can't imagine carrying that kind of a weight. Wow.
Yeah. And everyone thinks that this is just so amazing. We have social media and, but this is so much bigger than that. We need the licensed professionals. And so I took a step back and I said, okay, we're done. We're done with this for my own mental health and for the mental health of all these women. Where are the professionals? You stood with us in destruction. You watched us. You knew the grief that was coming. Where are you in the rebuilds? Where are you? You knew that we were going to need support. And every agency in the nation posts on their website that they offer support for their moms. It's great marketing. And it makes the hopeful adoptive parents feel good to come to an agency and say, oh, this is what we do to support our birth parents.
Right.
But when you really strip it down and look at what those offerings actually are, it's minimal to nothing.
Right.
And it was not okay. And we weren't okay. And so I wrote the nation's first curriculum and training, which is still the only one that exists now. It was just 2 years ago. We rolled it out at the National Council for Adoption Conference in Denver in the summer of 2017. And we wrote this training and curriculum that went to the agencies that said, look, I'm going to make this as easy for you as possible. I'm going to write this curriculum. I'm going to write this training. I'm going to come and train your staff. Here's all your online toolkits. Here's all your journals. Here's all the resources. We'll film all the videos. If all you can do is show up and hit play, do that. And so we're asking for 2 hours a month for a free community support group because most agencies will offer, free counseling for a certain period of time. So for the agency that I used, for example, we had a whole year of free counseling. And from the outside, if you don't understand, that sounds amazing. Oh my gosh, a year of counseling.
Right.
Okay. That's one appointment a month. So when you break it down for a lifetime of trauma, I get 12 appointments. The first year, I was still in shock. I didn't even know what was happening until year 5. So those appointments were useless to me.
Right.
And then when I went back to the agency, it was like, well, your time is up for your support. And it was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I need you now more than ever. And I'm past my time, right? So it was really important to us to hold the agencies accountable. And we believe that it's an ethical responsibility for the agencies to stand with the women post-placement, and that this is relational and not transactional. And we are real people on the other end of these children and these families, and it started with us.
Yeah.
And so we just said, it's not okay and it's not enough. And so we went to the agencies and just said, we're holding you accountable, and it should be a standard, not a luxury, if we can afford counseling, or if we have insurance, or if the adoptive parents can pay for it. It wasn't enough.
Right.
So here we are going national, training agencies all over the country. But the biggest thing for hopeful adoptive parents that I really want them to understand, and I'm a big advocate for adoptive parents. I love it. My son's adoptive parents are incredible parents, and they're amazing. And so if I can help and educate the families, I want to do that so we can do open adoption well. But they don't know that they really hold all the power in this. They're the ones writing the checks. The agencies actually work for them, not the other way around.
Right.
But because they come into this in such vulnerability, and the agencies have something that they need, which is connection to the moms and the babies, they feel a little bit powerless in that, but that's actually not true. And so we want them to be informed on the kinds of questions to ask and the way to break down the fees. If you're writing a $60,000 check, please ask where it's going and how it's being
Right.
broken down and how they're paying fees and if they're flying with, I mean, there's so many things we could go into ethics for days, but the biggest advice for the hopeful adoptive parents is when you're choosing your adoption professionals to work with, ask questions, push against what they've got on their site, push against just surface answers. And if they push back, it's a red flag. If they're not being transparent with you, there's something there that you need to pay attention to. And I know that is so scary when you are just wanting to have a family and have a baby so bad. It's easy to turn a blind eye to a lot of stuff. But my number one thing, you guys, at the end of the day, you will have to answer to your child about how you brought them home. It is undeniable. They are going to have questions, and you have to be able to say, what can you live with and what can't you? And really that'll be up to you, but the kids are going to ask and you have to answer to that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's good. Oh,
so that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Sorry, I paused it for a minute.
I totally agree. I think we could talk about this all day long. Yeah. And when I say the rabbit trail of social media, those are the kinds of things I started out with a post. Someone had posted something from a well-known adoption agency online, probably 2 years ago, from a handbook. And I read this and I thought, oh my gosh, this is in a handbook from an agency about adoption. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go too much further into that. And so as I was reading it, I thought, wait a second, this sounds like manipulation to me. And I was believing mostly as a foster parent that kids need homes. And kids do need homes.
Sure.
Foster families exist for a reason.
Sure.
However, reading some of that manipulation that goes out to biological mothers, as some of the language that is used and how powerful language is, so the rabbit trail has taken on a lot of sleepless nights looking into some of the unethical practices in adoption, some of the ways that adoption is just a business. Too much to go into here, I agree. Yeah. So one of the things that is so important to us as a family is to honor all sides of the triad. And we find that when we are honoring to our children's biological families, that we're honoring our children as well. And so I would love to know from you some advice on how we can honor birth moms, birth families, and honor that side of the triad, no matter what our story is and what our situation is. Do you have some suggestions for us as adoptive parents?
Well, I'm just going to share a few things that Derek's mom has done because I think she does it really, really well. And we've had to work really, really hard. This will be ongoing. And because Derek, my son, will continue to change and have different questions, and his emotions and his feelings about his adoption and things are going to change, we're just kind of along for the ride. And I understand, trust me when I say I've had so many foster parents message me that were not easy to love sometimes. And I get it. Birth parents can be hard to love. And I was, people are like, oh, if our child's birth parent was like you, and I was like, honey, this is 14 years out. I was your child's birth parent in year 1 through 5. You're just looking at me now. I've worked really hard, but I've also had the resources available to me and family and people to love me to get me healthy. Right. Not everyone has that. Okay. I recognize that I am not the norm of what people have to be able to climb out of things like this. And so one thing that was very interesting to us after we reconnected, so when I sent her that email, and I was like, I don't know if you remember me. She wrote back almost instantly, and she's like, we've been waiting. We have been waiting for you. We love you. We're here for you. And I know one thing for sure. The reason that Derek and I had a chance to build a relationship was because of the way that she loved me in my absence.
Yeah.
And it 100% is dictated on how the parents talk about their biological parents, how they keep their adopted children connected to their adoption story.
Yeah.
Let's sit down once a month and write a letter to your mom. And, she did all of those things in a long time of absence. Not even knowing if I was alive, if I was in jail. They didn't know anything. My number changed all the time. I mean, I was impossible. I was the crappy birth mom. And it's fine. I'm fine with that. But it was how she loved me and spoke about me and supported him in my absence that allowed him and I to have a relationship. Because she didn't project her frustration and anger and sadness and fear and all these things onto him. He was allowed to come to the table with a very open mind and his own perspective. So it was very interesting because for those first few years after we connected, trust me, we have an awesome open adoption relationship, and Derek comes and sleeps over, and my kids, they all get to hang out. It's amazing to watch my babies all together. But that took a really long time of rebuilding trust. It wasn't just I emailed her and then we had sleepovers. That's not what that looked like. Even a little bit. In fact, I talk to adoptive parents and I say sleepover and they're like, they catch their breath like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we could ever do that. And I'm like, I gave him back. It's kidnapping if I try and keep the kid. But that fear, and I'm like, that it doesn't have to look like that for you. It just happened to be what it looked like for us.
Yeah.
But what happened was I was in Arizona in a Barnes & Noble, and I live in Utah. I was in Arizona visiting my sister, and his mom and I had dictated our entire relationship. We communicated with each other. We talked about visits. We set it up. Derek was 9, and I got a text message in a Barnes & Noble. He said, hey, this is Derek. And I caught my breath and was like, oh my gosh, does your mom know you're texting me? I felt like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I need to call her and make sure she knows that you're texting me, because it felt so, and she's like, well, he's texting you from my phone. He came to me and asked me, and right then was a game changer in our open adoption, because all of a sudden we had an open adoption. I thought we had an open adoption before. It did not start until he had an opinion. And when Derek started to have an opinion about what this looked like, then things got real for us.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it really was about serving the needs of the adopted child, which is what open adoption is about anyway.
Right.
I mean, it's great for me and it's healing for me. It's hard for me, but this is about what he needs. And so now that he could express, I miss Ashley, can I see her? Then Lana and I make arrangements and figure it out. One thing that I have really appreciated about them, his parents, is that, so this is what this process looks like. So when he was 10, he wanted to come and sleep over. I was out of my mind with the sleepover. I had not been under the same roof with him overnight alone since I left him at the hospital.
Right.
So it was a very big deal for him to come and stay and to get that glimpse of what it would be like to be his mom for a couple of days. It was a really big deal. But this is how this process works. He goes to his parents, and his parents have a conversation. What do we feel good with? Are we okay with this? Before I even know that this is something that's on the table, they decide as his parents, is this safe? Do we trust this? What could be the aftermath? What is the emotional outcome? All of these things. And then they come to me and say, this is what Derek would like. This is what we're okay with. Take some time, because I have a husband and kids and a life that I have to decide what's the emotional outcome. Mm-hmm. Is this good or bad? Blah, 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 all of the things. And so then we process in our home, and then we go back to the table and say, okay, this is what we're good with. Let's do it. It took me 6 months to say yes to a sleepover, by the way, because it was scary and it was a lot. And I wanted to make sure that I could be healthy enough to be okay for him to come and stay. Here's something really amazing. Her role as his mother is not diminished because he needs me. And that is, she did a lot of work around her infertility. That's what that looks like when we talk to adoptive parents. They're like, you need to get over your own stuff. you need to do that or you can't do this well, because the insecurities and the jealousies and all of that will keep these relationships from organically becoming what they're supposed to be. And he can come to my house and she'll drop him off and he'll come and run and tackle me through my front door and hang out with his siblings and have a great time. And then guess what? When it's time to leave, he runs and tackles his mom on the front lawn and is ready to go home. That's what that looks like.
Yeah.
That's what work, that's what grief and trauma, that's what counseling, that's what all of these things look like. And next year, we have no idea what this is going to look like. When he gets a driver's license, is he just going to show up at my house? I have no idea what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
But we work really hard all the time to make sure that that's the image for Derek all the time, that he doesn't ever have to choose or feel a certain way. Whatever he needs or wants or feels, he's got a team to say, let's figure it out.
Right.
Could you say that one more time? I love what you just said about your role. I'm totally messing it up. Say that one more time.
Oh, I wrote it down.
Yeah. Her role as mother is not diminished because he needs me.
Yes. And what's
Absolutely.
powerful, that is so powerful. And I want our listeners to understand this, that you said this already. This has taken years to build, to flourish, to grow, to become established as it is. I think, but it happened. And going back to what you shared about your history, your own past, this has been really, really messy, because I think sometimes there's this misunderstanding when we've talked about these kind of things, and you're saying this way more eloquently than we ever could, and painting a much more beautiful picture than we ever could. But I think a lot of times parents will look at these situations like relationships with first families and with first parents, and they'll think, well, that could never happen because it was so messy for them, it was so messy for us, and we'll never work through that mess. But you're living proof that you keep moving forward and you can work through the mess. And
Yes.
That's what makes that so powerful. Yeah,
and this is where social media and stuff is so hard for families that are trying to look for information and figure out where they fall on the scale of this, so I talk about the 1s and 10s all the time. You have the 10s over here that just as soon as she left the hospital, everything was amazing. And they have this beautiful open adoption relationship right out the gate, and it's beautiful. And then you have the 1s over here that are screaming how horrible and I hate adoption and bring down the man and all these things. And I am right in the middle. So I'm a 5 and a 6. I love and hate my adoption at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still awesome and amazing and painful and messy. And it's okay to embrace both, but people don't know that they can embrace both and still have a healthy relationship that serves Derek.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the picture of embracing both, because I think that's a big thing for adoptive parents to understand, that, we can love and hate all of this. Our kids can love and hate all of this. Our kids' biological parents can love and hate all of this. And we're going to have all of those emotions all at the same time sometimes. Sometimes we're going to have days that feel like healing and wholeness, and then we're going to hit puberty, and then we're going to have feelings.
Get a driver's license.
Right. And we're going to go through, as now this larger extended family, we're adding in all these different dynamics that some days, biological family is going to just feel easy and comfortable. And then someday, oh gosh, biological little sister is going to hit puberty and all the feelings are going to come back up again. And so, I love that idea that it's okay. It is okay to have all the different range of emotions. And certainly as we put our kids at the center of all of this, that's where we need to be. Our kids are going to feel all the emotions. So what do we do as a bigger team now to support our kids and to come together and provide what they need? Ashley, I could just talk to you
Oh my gosh.
all day long.
Me too.
I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
This has been one of our best interviews ever. I'm saying it. It's on air.
I'm loving
Here's
it.
her. I'm being
Thank you.
serious.
It's here.
Yeah,
We appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking the time today to talk with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, a resource courtesy of the Honestly Adoption Company. To learn more about us, visit www.honestlyadoption.com.